When you think of like a cop show, right? Cop show, most people kind of do the same thing on cop shows. And then once in a while, you'll see somebody that stands out and you go, oh man, I look forward to seeing the show for that person because they do something with the character. Otherwise, everyone's just always kind of like talking like this, just in a way that like you can't even hear them. Like I've worked with actors where I can't even hear them and I'm only 2 feet away from them. It's so private and it's so to themselves, and it's this idea of what a cop or a detective should be. There's nothing special about it. What's your thing? And everybody has their own thing. It's just a matter of finding it.
We have one of our veterans with us today, all the way from New York via Zoom. His name is Victor Cruz. He is an actor, comedian, writer, director, producer, acting teacher, father, and husband. Victor, thank you so much for joining us. You are such a jewel. As I was doing my research to just make sure that I covered all the bases, I was so impressed at what an incredible career you have. You got a lot of commercials, you've got a lot of TV work, you've done film work, but I think for me, I'm more impressed with the fact that you have created your own projects. And not only that, but you give back to community. So I'm just so excited to talk to you. This is so fabulous. Okay, so let's start with Victor, the kid. When did you decide you wanted to get into show business?
Well, I tell you what, I think I was about 11 years old when I decided or knew that I wanted to be involved in the entertainment world. Somehow, some way, not clear on what it was going to be, but yeah, I had my eyes on it
And
early on.
what was the first thing you thought you wanted to do?
The first thing I thought I wanted to do actually at about 12 years old was be a cartoonist and create cartoons and do all the voices the way that Mel Blanc did voices with, like Bugs Bunny and all those cartoons I grew up watching, to Mike Judge with Beavis and Butthead and all those, funky cartoons they had on MTV. So, yeah, that was my original dream before I decided that I was going to get into more of the comedy and the acting world.
So which came first, acting or stand up?
The desire for acting and comedy, I think, were both there at the same time. I think I dabbled in acting first. I was in musical theater in high school. Um, and while I was in school at 16, I performed stand up for the first time.
Oh wow, where?
There was a comedy club downtown in the village called the Boston Comedy Club.
Oh yes,
Yeah, and
very
that was
famous club.
the first club I performed at. Um, and yeah, I caught the bug and I couldn't stop from that point.
Now, did you start doing it while you were still in school? You said you started at 16, but did you continue to do it through high school?
I did. I did. Whether if I was able to get on somebody's show or if I did one of those bringer shows where you bring 100 friends and you can perform for a few minutes, I did them. I did all until I was even producing my own comedy shows at 16 because I said, well, if I produce my own show, then I could also have the comedians I want on the show and I can do as much time as I want. So in high school, I was already producing my own comedy shows. But when I went into college, I was only performing comedy during the summer times because the school was demanding of my time, so I couldn't really do it as much.
Now, where did you go to school?
I went to college. I went to SUNY Purchase College,
Mm-hmm.
and I studied in their acting conservatory there. Um, yeah, and that was the first time me spending that much time in nature because I was from the South Bronx, and I was familiar. Well, it was just busy. It was noisy and busy. So being surrounded by raccoons and deer and nature was a totally different thing, and it was very cool.
So now you've graduated, you come back to the city. How did you start your career?
So before I went into college, I had already started freelancing with an agent that I had met while I was doing stand up. She saw me doing stand up at 17, and she gave me a card and she said, "Hey, you got something, kid. Give me a call." And I was like, "Cool." So I called her the next day. I'm not here to waste any time. She's like, "No, sweetie. I meant call me in 5 to 6 months when you've developed your material." I was like, "Why? How can I read code at 17? I don't know what you mean. So I think a part of me was like, whatever, who is this lady? And kind of just like, I think I lost her card or whatever. I was like, whatever. Anyways, this woman tracked me down somehow, some way. And she stayed connected with me. She was basically sending me out to auditions. And I wasn't allowed to audition when I was in college because I guess the contract we had signed was like we had to be in school because the hours were really demanding. Literally from like 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, we were in class or rehearsing for plays. And so I would, from time to time, had really bad allergic reactions. And this is why I couldn't go to class. And so that's how I was able to get to auditions in the city. So before I graduated college, I actually booked my first TV show literally the day before graduation. So I was literally stepping into the new journey with a job. And so, yeah, I did an episode of The Sopranos. That was like my first gig.
I've heard this story, but I love it because it's relevant to so many actors. You book a job, yeah, and you actually got to be part of the reading, right?
Yes.
You guys, which is unheard of. We don't have that so much anymore, where they will actually bring in all the actors to read. So tell us about that experience for you, because this is your very first job.
Yeah, this is my first job. And so now, you've got two people to my left is James Gandolfini. The person to my right is Edie Falco. You've got the entire cast of Sopranos is there. And Steve Buscemi is there, and it's just like, oh my God, these are all these people that I've seen them do so many things. And I had one line, and I was like bracing myself to say my one line the entire time. I was like, oh my God.
I know that.
So yeah, but the experience was great. Everybody was really nice, and I think there was one moment I got really scared because I said my line, and then James Gandolfini just like looked at me, and he looked at me not like James Gandolfini. He looked at me like Tony Soprano, and I was just like, man, I think I'm gonna get whacked at the end of this reading. I don't know, just not sure, but I didn't get whacked. It turned out to be really nice, and everybody's really sweet. It was a really nice
that's
experience.
Awesome. First job, one line, and you feel the pressure, like, can I do it again? And nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. It's like, okay, thanks, sign them out. Yeah, exactly.
How was that one line I just said? Yeah, anybody know? And of course the episode continues, and you're gone.
So now, did you get cut out from the one line, or is that?
Yeah, I did. I got cut I ended up on the cutting room floor for sure. The line was a line that I wasn't crazy about, and it was my first job, and I was like, ay. But like, how do you tell anybody, I don't like this line? Excuse me, writers and producers, I don't like this one line, my first job. And the line was, please don't shoot me. I just come to this country. And they definitely wanted an accent with that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to just try to ground this line as best as I can so that I'm not offending my own community and others around me. And I did the very best I could. And in the end, they just cut the line. Maybe they had the same feeling I did. They weren't sure about it. But it was fine. The thing was that my father didn't believe me that I was on the show. I told him, Dad, I'm on the show. And he's like, I didn't see you. I was watching the show. I didn't see you. I'm like, Dad, I was on the show. You're lying to me. It's like, why would I lie about that?
No, I know that. I know that feeling of being left on the cutting room floor and going, what happened? It was like right there. You see my hand. For me, it was my hand. There's my hand. But there's my hand. It was like, And that
Yeah.
was and it was before DVRs and where you could slow it down and
Slow
say,
it down,
"There's
right?
my hand right there." Yeah. So I think it's important for actors to know who are watching this that it happens to everybody. You
Yeah.
know that you will probably get fired at least one time from a job, and it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with it not fitting on the canvas at that time. And sometimes they overwrite stuff, and then when they get to the editing room, they're cutting stuff down because they only have so many minutes in which to deliver it. So
Mhm.
I wanted to stop on that for a second because these are the things we're not taught in acting school. Guess what? I've got this fabulous little bundle just for you because you are a fabulous actor. I got it for you. So, what do I got for you? Let me tell you what I got for you. I got the PR cheat sheet, which every actor needs. You need to know how to do your own PR until you get that job where you can pay for a PR person. Then I have the 12-step audition. That's another cheat sheet. Sometimes you get freaked out at auditions and you don't know what to do. Well, my 12-step audition cheat sheet will help you and guarantee that you will slam your audition every time. And the third thing I got for you is the casting sites. I have a list of casting sites so you can go and just submit yourself for that next big part. How does that sound? It sounds good, doesn't it? There's so much that we're not given in acting school that actors are not prepared for. So I love that. So then you start working as an actor.
Well, 8 months go by and the phone doesn't ring at all. It's quiet. And I'm thinking it's gonna take off, man. I just did The Sopranos. I had my one line. We're gonna do this, and the phone doesn't ring at all. And it's just so funny how quick you're quick to give up or something. I'm literally sitting by the window and looking out, and I'm like looking for a star to wish upon, and like I see one star through all the pollution, and I say, help me out here, and then suddenly that star starts to move, and I realize it's a plane. It's not even a star. But I wish on the plane anyways. And, shortly after, I started booking commercials. I started booking a lot of the New York shows like the Law and Orders and the different shows that were happening. And slowly every year got better and better. You start to meet different casting directors and people get a chance to know you and, bring you in for more stuff. So,
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. You're starting to book work. How were you waiting on the agent to call you? Were you making a list and submitting your stuff? What was that process for you in the first couple of years?
so yeah, I think the first couple years, I was dealing with the one agent, um, where I kind of relied on her to submit me. And so I was sending, you know, headshots out to casting directors and anybody out there that could, just to get some kind of notice. I did all of those things. I sent postcards and things like that. But I did hang out with the one agent for a while until I realized, because I didn't know at that time you could freelance if you weren't signed with the agent. Well, now you can, you can go out and date other people.
Which
And
which you can only do in New York. You can't do that in LA.
I know
Yeah.
I remember when I went to LA, they were like, we don't do that hip pocket thing here. I was like, what hip pocket?
Yeah, they're very possessive in LA. You're dating
No,
officially.
I know it's an arranged marriage from the
That's
top,
right.
But I know, but I've heard that in New York City now that you're finding less and less of that that used to happen in New York where you could freelance. Now people are starting to not believe in that as much here, from what I understand. From like the younger actors who are coming up and going out there, and they're like, yeah, people are saying they don't do that anymore. That was the old school way of doing it. And I was like, well, there was something cool about the old school way of doing it, at least in New York, because sometimes people weren't a right fit for you, and or vice versa. Just maybe it wasn't a good relationship. And I met a lot of people in the process that were really nice, and some people that were not that they weren't nice, but they had a particular way of doing things that wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, and you kind of just had to deal with that personality to get in the door. So,
So now you're getting your rhythm, and during this period, when does stand up factor back in?
so I think stand up was always present throughout. You know,
Okay.
that's the one thing that kept me busy. I didn't think about the phone not ringing because I always stayed busy with stand up. I was always in the club at least 3 or 4 times a week. I was out there doing really late shows sometimes, and so it kept me busy, kept me fresh. So when auditions did come up, it was kind of like theater, kept you active, your body active. So when you walked into that audition, it didn't feel like you had to kind of dust yourself off a little bit if there were big gaps in between one audition to the other.
And during that time, did you find a mentor? Did people rally around you to give you information and kind of start steering you down the path?
You know, it's interesting. I didn't have like one mentor, somebody who like took me under their wing, that I kind of listened to. I learned from so many different comedians or people around me. Sometimes I learned from people that weren't so nice to me. I learned like what I didn't want to do or who I was not. You
Which
know,
is just as important, right? It's just as important. Sometimes that's even more important.
yeah. And so that helped me a lot. You know, and then there were also too sometimes, I found myself in circles where I don't know if it was as productive of a circle, but it wasn't. It was just I was just basically just working with what I had, right? So platforms presented themselves, and I was in this environment. Sometimes they were great, sometimes not so great. But I think overall, everything at that time served as a mentor for me.
And then you came to Los Angeles to pursue your stand up. Did you come out to LA?
Well, I had visited LA at first from time to time. Like I would come out for pilot season
Oh, okay.
and I would stay, but I was still in New York. And then in 2012, I had decided, my wife and I decided we were going to move to LA. Um, she was okay with, making that move and saying, okay, look, trying to like elevate myself in my career. And we're like, all right. I had a buddy of mine who's been a buddy of mine since college, and he said, if you come out to LA, I feel like they're gonna celebrate your successes. I feel like you're gonna be stuck doing the same thing, staying in New York. And I said, well, maybe it's not a bad idea. And came out there, and literally, I went out to LA 2 weeks later. My wife stayed behind because I was gonna set up shop, and she called me. And she's like, I'm feeling anxious. And I was like, well, what's up? Are you okay? And she basically shared with me that she was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
We had celebrated me moving to LA, and my
You
daughter's
left her
firstborn.
something. You left her a package.
I was just trying to leave a little something behind just to make sure she wasn't lonely. And and then she starts to cry, and she's like, oh, this is, I messed this up for you. I messed up this opportunity. And I said, yeah, because it takes one person to make a baby. I said, you didn't mess up anything. This is life. This is number one. This is
Yes.
the important stuff. What we do doesn't define us. This is where it's at. So I was clear that I was not going to stay in LA. I stayed in LA for about 7 months, and then I came back to New York. So I had a little time, but every 2 weeks I was basically flying back to New York
Wow.
to be with her for all the doctor's appointments. And at that time, for some reason, flights were decent enough that I could do that. And I think it was the first time I gained enough points where I actually earned like 2 free flights. I had never done that before, so that was cool. So I definitely used them.
And what was your experience in LA?
It was so different in terms of rhythm. Like even just going to an audition, the energy, the I want to say the people, but it's probably more so because I don't know them. So I don't
Right.
want to say that that had anything to do with who they are. But it was different. I had to get used to the process. Even commercial auditions felt different. They didn't feel like as warm to me as in New York. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I knew everybody and the spaces are smaller and
Right.
you're kind of just stuck with each other and you have to make friends and so you know everybody. Um, but in LA that was different. The one thing that I did enjoy was the quality of life was different than New York. I thought that I could in the days were longer. I felt like I enjoyed the energy of the day. In New York, everything happens so fast that you don't get a chance to breathe sometimes. And so that experience was great. Um, and I found myself doing what I did in New York and LA, which is where like I would get very invested in the characters. Like I would show up as the character. I wasn't playing. You know, if you say the guy's a scientist, well, you're gonna get a scientist to show up, and I might have little things in my pocket that I'm gonna use. You know, basic things that I'm gonna use in the scene. And some casting directors, not all of them, but some would look at me and go, "Oh, you don't have to wear that jacket. You don't have to wear those gloves." And I said, I just for me, I was just so used to committing all the way, and that was different. That it sometimes it didn't seem like that was that important, and that was
Yeah,
fine.
they just want the flavor.
I
They
want the
they're not, they just want the flavor. It's a whole different thing, and then you get different conversations about it because you'll have somebody say, "Oh yeah, come dressed up," and then you're the only one that comes dressed up, and everybody's looking at you like, "What's wrong with that person?" And then sometimes they say, "No, just go dressed as yourself," and you go in and everybody's in the jacket. Everybody's like, "What is happening?" So,
I tell you
that's LA. That's LA.
I tell you what, before I moved to LA, I had a situation where I had auditioned for a pilot in New York. They loved what I did. I must have auditioned 3 times in New York, and they were like, okay, we're going to fly him out. We're going to test him for this pilot. I came out, but my thing was if I'm coming from New York, I'm not playing around. I'm not treating this again like it's just a regular audition or maybe I'm taking it for granted. So again, I show up as the character, but they already know because I'm using the same thing I used in New York. It's not like I went out and bought I'm not looking like a starship, like a trooper from Star Wars. I'm just it's what I was wearing before. Anyways, I show up and I remember the guy it was just 3 of us, but the third guy wasn't there yet. And I show up and the guy was just he looks at me from head to toe. He's just like, wow. He's like you're prepared. And he had like his script in his hand, and I'm thinking, this we're testing for a pilot, man. What are you doing holding that script? And I just looked at them and I said, yes, I am. And in my mind, I was like, I've traveled 3,000 miles. I gotta give myself a shot.
That's right. That's right.
And I ended up booking that pilot,
That's well.
which by the way was a job I only had for 6 days, and then I was let go, which is what you were saying earlier.
That
You always,
happened to me. I mean, I've had that happen to me twice.
uh,
On one, it was a pilot with a known comic, and he didn't like anybody. So people were getting fired every day off that pilot. Every day people were in. We kept having readings because they kept bringing in new people, and I would sit, I would watch. I was like, I do my stuff, and then and this should have shot like 7 days. We were now on the 14th day,
hmm,
and then all of a sudden he zoned in on me, and I was like, okay. So he starts. He says her lines are funnier than mine. So
oh
then there was a rewrite. Bring in so we do the lines, and then he says I was behind a desk. He said her desk is too big. So then the prop department to mess with him put me in a little preschool table with a little
oh,
preschool chair. And everybody laughed. They thought it was so funny, and I'm still delivering the lines. And he was like,
that's funny.
she is funnier than I am. And
Oh,
at that moment, I was like, I'm done. And I remember going to my car, and this is where, when you had your beeper, you didn't have a cell phone
oh
yet.
yeah,
So I got the
oh yeah.
beeper, and when I saw the number, I said, "Uh oh, it's casting. I'm out of here." So I went home. I called, and the casting director who had booked me on some other parts, he said, "I am so sorry." I said, "Nope, You don't have to tell me. I already know. I said, don't even worry about it. Don't even worry. So it's that thing that you have. But by that point, I had already been fired off of another job, which was devastating to me. The first one, because you don't expect it. You come in there, you're prepared, and just like what you said, you're given. When I had read, there was the scene was fantastic, but when I got on set and we did the table read, I had one line that made no sense at all, and I kept trying to figure out how to make that line funny. I was like, okay, there's got, and I kept like trying. It wasn't a funny line. It made no sense. And about the fourth day, and we are now in rehearsals, and I'm still delivering that line. And I went home that night, and the agent called and said, "You don't have to go back tomorrow." I said, "Well, but my stuff is there." He said, "Well, they'll have it at the gate for you." They'll have it at the gate.
They couldn't even bring it to you. No one
And
could
I was devastated. I cried. I said, "I've never been fired off of anything ever in my life. I'm the one that leaves. I've never been fired." And so, and then it took me a month to lick my wounds. So, but that's something they don't, again, they don't tell you.
It's true. It's true. Before that job, I had another one that I was really excited about, and I had been to like three different rehearsals for it. It was with a really big director, a big star, and at some point the director just didn't like what I was doing with it, or he didn't find it funny or something, or just I kept changing the script, and then finally I got the call that they still paid me for my time, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
not
about
the
the
same.
money. It's not the same. You're looking forward to the opportunity to work with people you admire, and so that was tough. That was really tough to feel that, and then literally like 2 months later, this pilot thing comes up, and similar to like your story, the star of it, I would have been his basically sidekick. I was like his number two, and the thing was he wanted to hire his friend to be the guy, and he was fighting it, but the network was they would say, we can't hire your friend, like we have to hire an actor. And he kept fighting it and fighting it and fighting it to the point that they just kind of went his route. But it turns out, and obviously I never wish anything bad for anyone. I appreciated the opportunity, because even though I had the job for 6 days, I can't tell you how much I learned from it. Um, but apparently the show never worked out. Literally, the set was like falling apart. The guy's energy wasn't the greatest, and I guess it did what it had to do on its own. So,
Well, that same thing over on this end. That show
oh
didn't
yeah,
work out either.
oh, there
So
we go.
it's lovely. I'm not wishing anybody well, but it's lovely. That's all I have to say. So let's talk about some of the people that you have worked with that you really not only took away stuff from that experience, but you have actually been able to share it in your teaching.
Hmm. It's interesting. The first person that comes to mind, there are two people that come to mind when I think about actors I've worked with that I've walked away with something. It's I can't I feel bad because the first one I can't remember her name, but she played Mrs. Doolittle in Eddie Murphy's Doctor Doolittle. She
Okay.
played his wife, and I was literally just, this was early on in my career. I was a background actor in a movie. I was just in the background, an extra, and she was so kind to me. She was so kind to me, and she had this really great conversation with me and asked me if I wanted some water, brought me some water. And I saw, this is so sweet. Like, you don't have to do this. I mean, you're the star of this movie. And she said, she made it clear to me that we are human beings and we should be kind to each other. And that was very early on, that I always tell people, be kind to each other. And you should not treat people differently because you're here or there, you're up there or down here. It's not about that. The second person that stands out to me is Al Pacino. I worked with Al Pacino briefly in this film called The Humbling, where I played a security guard and I wouldn't let him into the theater. He had to perform this Shakespeare play. It was a part of a nightmare sequence. But what happened with that project was that Barry Levinson is the director, and he's like, "All right, let's rehearse," you know. And I was like, "All right," but no one introduced me to Al. Like usually they introduce you to the actors beforehand, and no one introduced me to him. We just started this rehearsal, and I see this little guy coming from far away. I was like, "I wonder if that's Al Pacino." He's not as tall. I mean, I had heard he wasn't the tallest guy in the world, but I mean, neither am I. You know, it's not like much taller than him. But I see him coming. We did the scene. Barry comes over. He goes, "I liked it. Let's shoot that." And I was like, "Great." We did a couple of takes the way it was written, and then we did a couple versions or a few versions of it improvised. He was like, "Hey, Al's gonna say something, and you say something. And Al says something, and so on and so on." I'm like, "I'm gonna improv with Al Pacino. Sure, let's do it." And so, one thing that I loved about Al was that I never once felt that he showed up with ego and pride. He showed up to the set to work as if it was the very first acting gig he ever got. And I had met other actors that had not been in the business that long, and they weren't so kind. You know, they had their stuff. But this man, who, you know, you could think that he might be this kind of person. He was not. So kind. And I said to myself, you know what? You stick to who you are. You be kind, stay humble. And it was just a good example. So anytime I work with an actor that could be difficult or not the nicest person in the world, I just think about Al and I go, listen, this guy is a kind person. You need to learn from him.
So I want to dig into all the amazing projects that you have done, that you've produced, you've written, you've starred in, that you've done. Because to me, Latino actors have to do more of that. You know, we depend too much on somebody calling us for a job, and most of the times they're not coming. Those jobs are just not coming for us. We're not part of that group that's on the list. You know, there might be 3 Latino actors on that list, but that's it. It's not open to most of us. And what I love is that you are constantly creating your own projects. So I want to talk about, you mentioned the first thing you produced was a stand-up show so that you could have the time you needed and you could put in the comics that you wanted. I want to talk about what was the first film short you decided to do yourself and why.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I'm going to say produced, I didn't direct yet, but I'd written and produced a short sketch called Flaw and Order, which was a spoof on Law and Order. And this was a chance for me to play fun characters. I played this, this South Bronx girl called Awilda Lopez, which it was fun. I played a detective in it. What happened was a friend of mine had called me and basically said, I think you're super talented, man. You play all these characters. You should do something with this. And he inspired me so much that night that I literally wrote that first sketch that night. And then I called him right away. I said, dude, I wrote it. Let's make it. And then suddenly I was too fast for him. So anyways, that was the beginnings. I wrote and produced that short, which eventually became a DVD called The Victor Cruz Show, Volume 1, Who is Victor Cruz? At that time, I was really still figuring out who the heck I was. I didn't know.
So what year was that?
That was in 2005.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, 2005, I had started creating that DVD, and in 2006, we released it. And all throughout New York City, I was doing comedy shows, and I was harassing people after the shows to buy the DVD. I'd be holding a whole stack of DVDs in my hands like I was a rapper in the street trying to get you to buy it. And I would harass people so much that if they loved the show, then they would buy it naturally. But if they thought I was so-so, they would just buy it so I would shut up and leave them alone. And eventually, that sparked interest in me to want to get a little further and direct. And I went ahead and I was watching Yo Soy Boricua by Rosie Perez.
Mm-hmm.
And in that documentary, there was a little short piece about the sterilization of Puerto Rican women. And I'm a big fan of the Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And I
So
thought,
I'm gonna stop you. Tell us a little bit about that, because that actually was a period in history where Puerto Rican women were sterilized against their will or without knowing.
yeah, so in 1937, a bill was written, or a bill was signed to make it okay to sterilize women on the island of Puerto Rico. Um, and what they did was, it was based off of another method that was being used in the United States, which was called eugenics. It started in 1917, and it was a way of creating what the U.S. thought could be the perfect population, which is to eliminate, and they were targeting women of color, women who were physically disabled, and women who were just financially poor. They thought if they could eliminate those three types of women, that the U.S. would have the very best people. This was the mentality. The church fought it for a while, and they won, and they stopped this process of eugenics. When I did a lot of my research, what came up was that that actually was the thing that inspired Hitler, in regards to the Holocaust, this idea of a perfect race. So that idea had actually started here and inspired apparently him to do what he did. Now, they had stopped it in the US, but they had started it in Puerto Rico, and they thought that this would be the solution to help the island's financial situation, its current situation with overpopulation. And what they were doing was they had this method, and they presented it as if it were for the woman, but a lot of the times they were being sneaky about how this process happened. Sometimes they would ask women, did you want to get sterilized after literally giving birth to a child? And some of them were so out of it or under medication that they were not even conscious enough to make that decision, and they would help them to sign those forms.
Wow. So then you saw, it caught your attention on this documentary, and
Mhm.
what was your process after that?
I saw it. She lightly covered it in her documentary, and I love that documentary because I thought she covered a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but she basically just touched upon it and then moved on. And I said, that's interesting. I didn't know much about it, so I actually went to Centro of Puerto Rican Studies, and I sat there for days. They have a lot of resources in New York when it comes to Puerto Ricans, and I learned a great deal about it. And I said to myself, I'm gonna make a short narrative about this, and I'm gonna kind of set it up, kind of like a Twilight Zone episode, because I'm gonna mix a little history, but I'm gonna do something that's sci-fi in it, um, to change up the narrative. And yeah, so I wrote a script that was 11 pages long, and it turned out to be a 15-minute narrative. I got some excellent actors to do it. It toured the festivals. It won a couple of awards here and there.
Now, were you just the writer director, or did you, or were you acting in it as well?
I didn't act in it. This is the
Okay.
first time I was just behind the camera, and it was so liberating. No pressure to act. It was just me just enjoying calling the shots, and then obviously then creating a whole new version of that film once I was cutting it. So I really learned how to edit a film during that film. I was cutting that.
What was the big eye opener for you? Going into it and then actually doing process and going, oh, wait a minute, this is not what I thought.
Well, I wasn't afraid of. I didn't become afraid. Like, I have friends who produce shorts who are actors, and they go, "Man, that thing took out so much out of me. I don't think I could ever do that again. It's just too much." For me, I thought to myself, I was like, "What else can I do?"
Mm-hmm.
And so it just sparked more hunger in me. Like, what else can I do? And I then created another short that I was actually in called "Congratulations, Mr. Gonzalez," and that one deals with a Puerto Rican actor who goes out to Hollywood, gets a big break, but in the process, something starts to occur to him and who and what he is. and it's pretty groovy. I'm gonna share that with you.
Oh, great, great. And are these pieces available so that anybody can watch it?
They're not available to the public because, well, sometimes schools in the past have invited me to show them and to have discussions with the students. So I use them as for that.
Okay,
Really. But once in a while, I make it available for people to watch.
okay,
Sometimes live.
okay. Now you also did a stand-up CD/DVD that you produced yourself.
Yes.
Why?
I wanted to do my own album. I wanted to do an album, and at that point, I was no longer believing that you had to wait on anybody or get a deal. I started finding resources where you could upload your own album, how to produce your own physical CD and DVD. I knew how to hire camera operators. I knew how to edit at this point. I was like, I can kind of do this myself. I don't see why you would need anybody more than you to do this. And so I went for it. I went for it and produced it in East Harlem, at a little spot called FB Lounge, which is not there anymore, but it was an extension of La Fonda, which is
Oh, yes.
over 106th
Know it
Street. So it was
very
right across the
well.
street. And that place was packed, man. That place was so packed. I mean, the owners were very happy. There were people hanging off the ceiling. It was so packed, and it was a really awesome night.
Oh, that's so. So okay. When is the evolution of the stockroom?
Yeah, so the album, that album recording happened in 2010, and I had started writing. So when I came out to LA for those 7 months, I wrote the stockroom while I was in LA. Again, everything is very quiet in LA. I'm kind of new in town, so it's not like I'm going out every single day. I discover a place called the Coffee Bean, and that's where I'm at from the morning to the night with my laptop, and I'm talking to myself in the corner, and I'm creating characters. And yeah, so I written the stockroom in 2012. When I came back to New York, I was prepared to shoot it in 2013 with no money, but I was trying to raise money. And originally we were trying to raise like 200,000 to make the movie. It was really hard to raise $200,000 to make that movie. I mean, it was just so. I was like growing a beard. I was not
Oh
well
God.
health wise. I wasn't seeing my family. My daughter was just born. And I think my wife just had to sit down with me, like, what the hell? Look at you. I was looking like Tom Hanks in
Wilson.
Castaway. Me,
Yes.
but me and Wilson were there just
Yeah.
trying to make this movie. Uh, so, anyways, I just decided to pull the plug on it, um, because I have a lot of people in my corner. Like I have a spiritual family and a spiritual teacher who just kind of, she was like, you got to stop. You got to stop and you got to listen and you got to take the time to do it correctly. So in 2014, we shot the movie and we ended up shooting between in-kind sponsorships and actual physical money. Like I used my own money and some of it we raised. It probably ended up costing us about $62,000 to pay for everything. That was probably my film school. I learned how to direct and edit with the shorter projects, but this was my film school because I got my ass kicked on so many levels. I really put myself through the ringer. I wasn't sleeping, it was a tough time, and I didn't give up. I didn't give up. I kept making the movie, and a lot of good came from it. But I think looking forward, and the advice I always give people is you don't have to make a movie that way, especially not today. Make a movie within your means. Be realistic. You can still make a movie. It's fine. Just don't kill yourself in the process.
Can you share some of your work ethic with us?
Yeah, my my work ethic today is better than it was before. But what happens with me is that once I start producing something, once I start creating something, I won't I'll make it all the way to the end. I don't quit. I don't stop because now at this point I'm so invested. I've already invested a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of people in the process also helping me too. And it's not that I don't want to let them down. I also don't want to let myself down. And without putting that into words, because sometimes I don't say that out loud, but I think if I think about it, I'm saying I can't let myself down. I know that I have it in me to finish this project, and so I'll finish it. But the way that I work now, to answer your question, the way that I work now is I do a lot of research. I take the time to understand what goes into a particular thing or particular project. And then I just look and see if I can fulfill that, if it's realistic within my own means and with my time.
So you're counting the cost before you make the investment.
For sure, for sure. I'm not going to sacrifice the things that I need to provide for my family. But I still am going to take a risk on myself. It's just a little bit more calculated today, a little smarter.
So you get the stockroom made.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? Now what happens? I want to know.
I have no budget for post-production.
Oh, Lord.
Because I just needed to make the movie. Now we're in post. And now I'm like, well, I have to cut this movie myself. Can't have nobody else cut it. So I'm not even thinking about the other processes. And I'm in the basement of a house and it's freezing in this basement. So I literally have like a coat on and a hat and I'm cutting. And I don't know why it's so cold in the basement. The rest of the house, hot. Basement, the heat just didn't quite travel well. So I'm freezing. And so I'm like, when people watch this movie, they're going to feel cold. It's going to be frozen.
Oh, Lord.
And so I cut the movie. I realized in the process that I'm missing sound for a very important scene, and the sound is not there. And I called the sound guy and I said, "Hey, where's the sound? Let me see if I got the sound. Oh, here's the files." I play the files. They're from a totally different project he was working on. I'm hearing people laughing. I'm like, these are not my actors. So now I ADR the film myself. I ADR the scene just to have it as a temp track so I can figure out what's going on.
Wow.
And I don't do such a bad job. It's not terrible actually. It's just that I don't know how to sound mix. I don't know about audio and things like that. So I'm at a screening for a movie that I was invited to by a friend. It was like part of a festival. I'm watching his movie, and then filmmaker and editor Carlos Barrios. Do you know him?
Mm-hmm.
So he started out as a music producer in the freestyle era, and he produced all of like Lisa Melendez's music and a bunch of freestyle music. And so he eventually became a filmmaker and was an editor and also was a sound mixer, was mixing sound for people's films and stuff. We just happened to be at this screening together. I didn't like the person who was hosting the interview. I felt like was attacking my friend about his movie, and he was just like saying some weird stuff, and I felt like he was attacking him.
A hater, just a hater.
I think thought he was doing good, but I felt like he was devaluing my friend's journey or whatever. I don't know. So, anyways, I stood up and I said, "Look, man," and I never do that, but I just stood up for my friend in front of everybody. And then suddenly everybody was just like
You're
rising
so
up
Puerto
with
Rican.
Me.
You are so Puerto Rican.
I was like, yo, come on, bro, what's up with that? And
don't be doing that to my friend. Don't diss him like that. What's wrong with you?
Like that.
Yes.
I see you outside.
That's right. Man. That's right. 3:00. Come on.
So so then he tried to change the subject, and then Carlos raised his hand. He's like, "No, bro, I think we need to talk about what Victor just said." And suddenly, now we're having this conversation, and as we're leaving, Carlos sees me. He goes, "Yo, come join me for a glass of wine." I was like, "All right." So we went next door. We're sipping on wine. We're chatting about what just happened. And then I tell him, I said, "Dude, I'm missing audio in this entire scene, and I need to fix it. Would you help me? I know that you." He said, first he goes, "No, I won't help you." He was messing with me. And then he goes, "Of course." He's like, "Come by my place. Let's watch the movie, and I'll see what I can do." Anyways, we watched the entire movie. this is a first cut that I did. And he said, dude, congratulations, man. You did your first cut. This is great. He said, he gave me some advice about stuff. He said, you need to work on some of the cuts. He said, you need to work on some of the moments where people are not speaking. What are those moments about? What are people thinking in those moments? How they're receiving those moments, and let your film breathe a little bit. I said, okay. And anyways, what started as him fixing the audio for that scene, he ended up stepping in as an additional editor, and he basically helped me clean the edit for the entire film.
Wow.
Not only fix the audio for that scene, but fix the sound for the entire film as best as he could. And so he became an editor on the film as well as a sound mixer, and he provided a lot of the music because he had so many musicians that he had worked with that there's a lot of freestyle music in the film, and yeah, he definitely helped to save my film. Now I want to also give credit really quickly to my spiritual teacher because she was directing the film with me since I was in it. I couldn't have done it without her because.
So who is she? Let's talk about. Let's get all in the Kool-Aid. Who is she?
So her name is Guru Enlightenment, and I've probably known her now for about 14 years. I've known her.
And is she an actress or what is her artistic background?
No, she's not an actress. She's not a writer. She's not a director. She's a spiritual teacher, and she's been helping people for years, guiding them to what their truest purpose is in life. And so what happens is she has a gift where she communicates with the spiritual realm. So your spirit, the spirit that is imprisoned in all this gunk and society raised person, there's a spirit inside you that is telling her exactly who you are. That's how she knows who you are and what you should be doing. So she has spirits that come down and guide her when it comes to directing, writing, and dealing with actors. And her and I have worked on a lot of projects together.
And how did you guys meet?
I met her through a friend. I had just lost my dad. My dad had passed away back in 2006, and he had been battling with diabetes for a long time. And in 2006, his body just started breaking down, and he couldn't. He went to the hospital for one thing, and he never left and was there for about 7 months.
Wow.
So after he passed, I was very confused. I was trying to figure my life out, and I had a lot of unanswered questions. I met this girl. I had seen her in a show. I was supporting a friend of mine, and she was one of the castmates, and I thought she was really funny. So we met after, we talked a little bit, and then one day we got together just to get to know each other, and she started talking to me about her teacher. And at first, I'll be honest with you, I was like, I don't know what this is. This sounds like some brujeria, peritimo stuff. And if you're Puerto Rican, you've already seen somebody do a limpieza in your house, a cigar, and you're like, please don't put a coconut in the corner of my house. Can't do it. So maybe that's where my brain went. I thought that's what that was about. I was like, ooh, I don't know. But anyways, she invited me to a workshop that she was doing in 2007. It was the top of the year, and I remember going to her house, and I sat there, and she was teaching lessons, and a lot of the lessons were like, for me, I thought were basic things in life that you should be doing. She's talking to people about making sure that you take care of yourself, that you love yourself, that you're paying your bills, that you're doing what you have to do. And I said, these are basic things.
Common sense.
Then common sense stuff. And actually, when I knew I was going to be on this show, I thought to myself, at some point she might be a great person on your show because she's always talking about common sense.
I would love to talk to her. Yes.
Common sense. So we'll talk about that. But so she, and when I thought about it more, I said to myself, well, you know what? These are basic things to me, but at the same time, these are a lot of things that I don't personally take care of. I don't actually truly love myself in the way that she's describing it. I don't look at myself in the mirror and accept myself for who and what I am. I don't do that. I'm afraid. I make choices that are fear-based. And she's right. And I remember that night I had to leave early, and I told her, I said, listen, I'm really sorry. I loved your meeting. I still didn't quite understand what she did at that point. I mean, I'm saying it to you because I understand what she
Right,
does
right.
now. But at that point, I said, look, I got to run because I had to do a comedy show. And she said, I feel like I already know you. And she gave me this really big hug. It's one of those hugs, like when you meet people that give good hugs,
Yes.
and you go, ah, this is a really good person.
It covers
And
you for the rest of the evening.
that's
Yes.
it, man. That's all you need. You just feel like a kid again, and abuelita's hugging you, and that was what the feeling felt. And after that, that was the beginnings of me on my spiritual journey to really finding who and what I was, and it changed my life forever. It changed my life forever because even acting, producing, writing, it's affected everything in such a great way. Because for so long, I was hoping and praying that the world would accept me, take me into their club, let me be a part of what they're doing. Because you grow up and you admire these things, and you
Right,
so
right,
badly want to be a part of it.
right.
And so sometimes you don't see what your gifts are, what your truest value is. I was missing that for a long, long,
Because you
long
keep
time.
looking for that outside validation, and it really is about your validation and you honoring you. So that's beautiful. That is so. I am going to come back to that because I want to talk. You do a lot of work in your classes,
Hmm.
helping other actors with that because that is really necessary. I think for all artists,
Hmm.
that we come damaged to the table,
Hmm.
and so we don't get our healing to be able to really show our gifts in the best way. We're abusive of our gifts, we're abusive of ourselves, we're abusive of other people, and so it doesn't really honor the work or the talent or the God in you. It doesn't honor it. But
Hmm.
I want to finish on the stock room. So you get it done. You now have done it in post.
Yeah.
What is the distribution journey like for you?
So at first I was thinking I'm gonna try to sell this movie, and I'm gonna put it in film festivals, and I'm gonna meet a buyer and someone's gonna buy it. The same sort of thing that you think about when you make a movie. This is the way the world does it. This is the way you're gonna do it. And as I was submitting the movie and as, it was moving around, I started thinking to myself, instead of waiting, because I was looking at all the deals, I was looking at a lot of stories that, from different people's situations. And I thought to myself, like, do you really need to have someone else take your movie and do something that you could kind of do yourself at this point now? Because it's not like it used to be. Before, you needed somebody to buy the movie, distribute the movie. We weren't shooting on digital. You had to buy rolls of film, and then you had to pay big dollars to develop them. It was a whole other process. But today you could do it yourself. And so I had seen that Spike had distributed one of his films on Vimeo. And I said, well, he did it. He did it. Why can't I do it? And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to release this on Vimeo for digital distribution. And I'm also going to create a DVD of it. I know the DVDs are on their way out, but there's still people
Who
that
want
use
them?
the.
That's right.
And I'm like, in my neighborhood or in the community in the South Bronx or East Harlem, there's still people buying DVDs. So I'm going to think about my own people, and people in the Midwest and places where, you stop at a gas station and you can buy Psycho for 2.99 on Blu-ray. The, so so that's what I decided. And then I was like, well, how do I get the word out there? Now, the Mayor's Office of Film and TV has this program, this sort of credit where if you make a project in New York and 75% of your crew is in New York, at least 75%, and you did it here, they do this thing where they promote your film.
Oh, wow.
They, posters on subways and bus stops and inside cabs. And I thought to myself, well, that's a great idea. I got to go and try to take advantage of that. So I called, I filled out the application. Nobody called me back. I sent the emails. Nobody called me back. So finally I called somebody. I said, listen, hey, I did this, and that. Nobody's called me. And the guy was like, oh, we're so sorry. He said, let's set up a meeting for you. Came in, and the woman said, okay, what distribution platform? How are you distributing the film? I said, well, I'm distributing it on Vimeo. She says, well, most people that come in here, they're distributing their stuff on iTunes, Netflix, or in the theaters. Usually that's when we promote your stuff. And then it clicked in my head. I said, well, Vimeo is a paid platform. It's the same as iTunes. And she didn't know. She didn't know about Vimeo at the time and its own distribution paid platform. And she said, oh, that's interesting. So it's exactly like iTunes. I said, well, yeah, you can buy the film or you can rent it. So she didn't know. And so she did her research. And a day later, she emails me and she says, I think we can do this for you. She said, you'll just have to pay. It's like a very small percentage of my below the line budget. It was like a small percentage of that.
Okay.
And it was nothing that I donated. I felt almost terrible how much I was donating, but it's what they asked me, and it's all I really could give.
Right.
So I did, and I was able to pick the organization to donate it to. So I donated to Hola, which is the Hispanic organization of Latino actors. And I said, well, if I'm going to give this money to anybody, let me give it to my own folks who need it. And anyways, what I did was, so those posters went up right around the time that the movie released on Vimeo.
Wow.
We did a big comedy show at Gotham Comedy Club to promote it, because one of the things in the movie was that the guy wanted to be a stand-up comedian.
Right.
So it was perfect theme. And everybody who showed up to the show bought a ticket. They automatically got a DVD included in their purchase. So, that night we sold $1,000 basically, because it was included in the ticket price.
Right.
We sold about $1,000 in DVDs.
That's awesome. I love that. That is, because as a filmmaker, as an indie filmmaker, today it's 20 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to do that. But today, that's the best way to go to take care of yourself and your film. Because for you to give it to another distributor, they're not going to give you what you made, what you spent on the movie, and they'll try to do all kind of underhanded moves. So bravo, that is amazing. One of the things that I love is that about all your projects is that you have a vast body of work. So from your stand-up to this really serious short about women being sterilized in Puerto Rico, to your stand-up show, to then the Stockroom. And you don't stop there. You actually have a cartoon web series that's up on social media now. So I want to talk about that, because it's like your original dream as a kid of wanting to draw and do comic books has manifested. How did that come about?
Well, for the longest, I think for the past few years, I was doing the voice of the character, and I would call friends and I would prank them and have fun with them on the phone. And this was a character that I grew up with in my neighborhood, the character that lives in my family. I mean, she's a real person. When you watch the cartoon, you go, yeah, that's a Titi that I have somewhere. And so what happened was, for the longest, I've been trying to figure out what I was going to do with her voice. I just had a voice. Do I become her? Do I physically put on a costume, put on makeup? Do I become her? I was like, I don't know. I mean, I've done this before, but now I'm getting older, and what's the right thing to do here? So then the pandemic hits, COVID-19. On March 14th, Governor Cuomo in New York is like, can't leave your house.
Lockdown.
Lockdown. Go home. And I was like, okay.
Shelter in place, people. Shelter in place. Yes.
So now I'm at home, and I'm looking at all, a bunch of stuff that I've done, and I'm sort of revitalizing those things. And my buddy starts to do this live show, and so I start doing this character where I'm calling him into his show, and I'm this character Tita, and I'm talking to him and talking to his guests and harassing them and having fun. But I'm still thinking like, what am I gonna do? So I found this animator online who like animated people's funny clips, and I thought maybe that's the route to go. And but I started looking at his stuff, and I wondered how basic is this? Like, are these just like templates he's using? Is it as personal as I want it to be? So then I drew the character myself. I'm like, well, I'm an artist. Let me draw the character. Let me. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, can you animate a character that I draw? Okay, like if I design something, can you do it? He said, well, send it to me and I'll let you know if I can do it. And then I found another animator out of Panama who could create these digital puppets that I could move and speak and move them around in editing, and I could add layers. But he could create the digital puppets for me, and I reached out to him, and he said, "Yeah, I can take your drawing, and I can do exactly what you draw, and I can turn that into a thing." And I said, "Great!" And literally, like in 3 days, he had built the Tita puppet for me, this digital puppet that now I can open up in the software I have at home. Um, and so that was suddenly, and then I did an experiment. I did an episode called The Interview, of Tita in an interview, and and she's talking about what she did before and how she's perfect for this job. It was literally, it's our episode one, basically. And people went crazy. People went crazy over this character, and they're like, oh my God. And they started sharing it and talking about it. And I said, "Oh, this is interesting. Maybe there's something here. This is fun." And so then I created, episode two, and then three, and then the third one was the one that really hit because this was her reading to the kids. And I don't know if you saw this episode, but it's Goldilocks and the Three
Oh no, I
Bears.
didn't see that one yet.
You got to check it out. It's episode three. If you go to YouTube, if you just go to YouTube and type in Tita, Tita, in the search box, you're gonna see her. She'll pop up.
Okay.
And so episode three is called Reading to the Kids, and she reads Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but with a New Yorican splash and swag. And she's like, Mira, and so she told, this is a story about the three bears. Because it's actually called The Three Bears. That's the original story. So what she does, she takes the original stories in some of the episodes and reads them, but then comments throughout what she thinks might be inappropriate.
That's amazing.
That episode three was the thing that, like, I saw that everybody went crazy. Like, on Facebook alone, it got over like 300,000 views.
Wow.
Very fast. And I said, I think this is real, and I think and it's happening organically. It was the first time I was creating something that I wasn't forced. It wasn't anything that I planned. No strategy. Just because I wanted to, because I enjoyed it so much, and I found that people were enjoying it with me.
That's fantastic. Now let's talk about Victor Cruz, the acting teacher.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, acting obviously is a business that you and I love. It's a part of who we are. And so another side of me is that I enjoy just helping people in general. And so the need to help other actors, was something that came easy to me. And it was something I was doing just naturally, whether it was like helping people read, prep for auditions, or just assisting them with self-tapes before it was a term
Yes.
that people did. Sometimes you needed to do that once in a while, right?
Yes.
The director was in another country and you just had to do
Right.
that because of that. And then there was a messenger service that picked up the tape and
That's
took
right.
it to the location. So I just enjoyed helping people. And so I started doing it unofficially. And then about maybe 10 years ago, I held a workshop where I said, let me try it. Let me see if it works. I did a workshop that was for free. And over 40 people showed up to this workshop. Most of them I didn't even know.
And how did you
Which is people-
publicize it? How did
Just
you
through,
put the word
just
out?
through Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Facebook was the only thing that was out. I don't even think Twitter was really out yet. think MySpace was just phasing out. Instagram was not really in existence at that time.
Right.
Uh, Maybe it was, I don't know, but yeah. So I just put the word out there, and 40 people showed up, and then I said, okay, I think this can be something. And 2 weeks later, I started my first class where we had 18 students.
Wow.
Uh, and it fluctuated, because sometimes it's very packed, and then sometimes I had two
Right.
students.
And but
You know,
that's the business of acting. You know, you have a big group, especially when pilot season is coming up or the beginning of the season comes up, everybody wants in on the class, and then once work starts to level off, then people disappear again. You don't see them again. It's seasonal almost. You know, not
yeah,
you have people that will come for 2 months, get their workout, and then disappear, and then you have those few that
with you
stay throughout
for
the
a while.
year. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that was really how it began, and I was basically renting studios in Midtown as places to house my classes, and almost a year ago, I got my very own space, which
Wow.
is the space I'm in now. It's my space. I have access to it 24/7. It was very stressful to like rent studios and running around from one studio to the other and
Mm.
checking in. I mean, and I did it for a long time, but I was just very happy to finally have my own space.
You have several level classes, right? It's not just one acting class. You actually have like a beginning, an intermediate, and then a professional class.
Yeah, so normally that's what I do have. We've changed it up a little bit because of the current, climate of things. Um, we have some classes that are coming up in the near future, which are going to be there are two classes I'm going to offer remotely, which is an intro to acting class and an on-camera acting class. And it's funny because I just a few months ago, if you had asked me, well, how are you going to teach your on-camera acting class? I couldn't have an answer for you. But I also teach at another school, which asked me if I would continue my on-camera class as a remote class. And I remember thinking, well, how am I going to do this? And basically, what I've done is that I've turned though I'm teaching my students about working in front of the camera, I'm also turning them into filmmakers in a sense, because I'm teaching them to think like a director and how to frame things, the process of it, how to use their own equipment. So by the end of the class, they know what it's like to be in front, but they also know what it's like to be behind it, because I can't be there with them to actually shoot them or have the operator with me. So they're really getting two classes in one. And so that's what my on camera will be in the near future.
And you came up with an actor's guide to surviving coronavirus. You
Hmm.
you you is it a booklet? Is it what exactly is it?
It's a one page, well, actually it's a few page documents, and the reason it's a few pages because I had added in a bunch of links that were great resources, especially at the top of the pandemic. You know, theaters were shutting down officially. Productions had just come to a stop, and a lot of actors. There are actors out there that are not necessarily people that enjoy wearing many different hats.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are just actors, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think you and I are folks that can wear many different hats and multitask, and we enjoy that. But for some, they just want to stick to
Right.
that. And so I basically created this document to create the independent actor so that you think independently, that though things are shut down, that doesn't mean that you should stop your process and take this time to basically make sure that everything that is of you on platforms is updated, from your headshot to your reel to your resume. So also, if you don't have anything on platforms like Actors Access or any platform that an actor might use, take this time to film yourself, learn how to film yourself, create a channel, make things accessible for people to find you.
So I actually got your list.
Oh, you do?
I
Great.
found it. I'm going to just go over the 10 points that I found.
Yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
so this is Victor Cruz's Guide to Surviving the Coronavirus. And it is one, review and update your actor's resume,
Hmm.
get new headshots, create a slate, improve your self tape audition, rejuvenate your auditioning technique, keep your body healthy, create your own content, create a YouTube channel, organize a remote reading, sign up for a remote acting class. I think this is brilliant. I just think it's fantastic. It's wonderful, because I know a lot of actors who during this time they're in depression. They're in a ball. What do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to proceed. And you're giving such great information. So what made you come up with this? Because I think this is brilliant, Victor. I think this is like the best information for an actor for today.
Well, to be honest, I'm always like trying to come up with different ways to spread information, to inspire people, to just keep them educated on, things that they may not know, or more importantly, just keep them encouraged. Because I know that for anybody, whether you're an actor or not, you could easily let, this whole pandemic really bring you down and put you in a place where maybe the creativity stops. So between that and also the gentleman who operates my website, he's a good friend of mine. He's always encouraging me to make sure that I'm putting information out there. And he said, "Look, man, take the stuff that you want to share about what people should do, and let's create a list. Let's create a list that." And so I have to give him credit as well, because he definitely was like, "Put it in order, your thoughts, so people you can share that," because I think it's important.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your acting class
Hmm.
outside of coronavirus, but
Sure.
just your acting class. Um, you what I not having taken your class, but just getting information about your class. I There were three takeaways that I got. One is that you really work with the actors on self love, how to trust themselves, and how to fortify themselves in confidence.
Hmm.
So, what does that look like? Do you do exercises with your students to kind of give that to them? Because I think all three are things that actors are deficit in.
Hmm.
That they just don't know, first of all, how to love themselves. So when they go on a set, they don't know how to love anybody else, because it's all about me, 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 and am I doing it right, am I not doing it right, hey, look at me, what. So that self-love allows the actor to give to everybody. Going back to your Al Pacino thing, is that um, from what you said you learned from him, that is somebody who is anchored in love, who is not about, I'm Al Pacino and you're just a day player,
Right.
but where it is somebody who's just loving on you and just giving you the support in order to raise the project.
Yeah, so for me, it goes back to the lessons that I started learning from my spiritual teacher, where she taught me about loving myself, seeing myself for who and what I was or am, and also just acknowledging your own gifts, which sometimes you don't think you have. So when the students come to my class, the first thing that we focus on, whether it's in a class environment or private coaching, is that we focus on self. And how do I check in? How do I have them check in with themselves? Is I usually give them an exercise where they create an original monologue that is connected to dealing with things that get in one's way, and what you would say to that thing or person or entity, whatever it is, standing in your way, what would you say to it?
So would that thing be sabotage? Would that thing be, or is it self hate? I mean, do they figure out what that thing is at the moment?
They do. It's up to
Okay.
them. They fill in the blank with whatever's standing in their way. And then they create a dialogue, a monologue to it. And that becomes the first lesson, or the first piece of material that we use in our class. And the first thing I tell them is like, let's, no pressure to perform. Let's just read it, you share it. And they share it. And then we talk about the piece. And then suddenly they're excited because they realize that this is more than an acting class. This is a chance for them to look at themselves, and by using their own material, something they wrote that's personal to them, it empowers them because, one, most actors didn't realize that they could write. And when they do write, they go, oh, wow, I didn't even know I could write these words and write them the way that I did. Because another thing I tell them is don't worry about spelling, don't worry about editing, none of that stuff. Just write. And I literally give them 5 minutes to do it. So there's the clock is ticking. They have no choice but to keep going. And it's liberating for them. And that's the beginnings. And I feel like that process represents a lot of that, the confidence. And sometimes it shows us that we don't have a lot of confidence, but that we want to build to it. And the majority of the material that I use in my classes are original writings that the students create. Because I tell them it's easy for me to just grab a scene from Streetcar Named Desire, one of these plays that's considered a classic play, or we can just grab something from a movie that you love. But to look at yourself and to add so much value to you first, then when you deal with other material, you can treat it with the same amount of strength that you discover dealing with yourself. Another big important thing for me is that a lot of the times, and I think this is important for our community, is that some material, some scripts feel like they're up here, and sometimes, and especially in the beginning, you feel like you're down here, and that you are not worthy of that material, whether you know it or not. And let's say it's just in your subconscious. Well, I try to tell people this is a collaborative effort. This thing is not better than you. This is where I want to bring you because it's a collaboration. Some of that material, especially when it's brand new, the writer's still trying to figure it out. The writer hasn't answered all the questions. And to me, a script is just a theory, it's just an idea until the human being has said those words and then suddenly it makes sense. Sometimes something you will do as an actor will change the way that I even thought about this character in such an organic, real way that it's a collaborative effort now. And so I try to also build their strengths there because a lot of times, a lot of these fears that people have in acting classes is because they feel like they're not worthy of the material. And sometimes even the people who run these institutions sometimes are wrapped up in that stuff too. And some of it is very precious and the upholding of it. But voices have changed, perspectives have changed. What we accept in society is different. And when I went to acting school, if I asked my acting teacher, hey, I noticed we're doing, Eugene O'Neill and Tennessee Williams, but do you have any Latino playwrights? Is anybody that represents me? And they won't know quick what that is. But, to be fair, I've had some great teachers to say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out for you. And they've come back with a list of people that I didn't know because I was young at the time. But my point is this, my point is that it's time to really start hearing and listening what's happening and empower the students. This old school way of whipping sometimes is not so healthy. And I was part of that too. And, the schooling I went to where I felt like there was a bit of a whipping thing sometimes.
Now,
Like
when
whip
you
you
say
into shape.
whipping, break it down for people who may not know what that means.
Well, it's like breaking you down with force so that you could understand the material or to get emotional, to reach an emotional place, to break you down in a way that is hurtful and harmful in the moment to produce those tears and those emotions. I don't think is that healthy because what you could do to some people is you can actually give them something else that they didn't have now. Now there's a new insecurity
Mm-hmm.
coding the other one. Instead, we should ask the question, well, who are you? Let's look into what you have, because we have so many stories inside,
Right.
many different types of emotions. And if given the opportunity in a space that you feel safe in, you can find it without having to beat, beat, beat it out of somebody.
I agree. I'll just say this real quick. Growing up in El Barrio, when I had those teachers, because I studied with Stella Adler, I studied with Jose Quintero, I studied with a gentleman named Roy London, and some other teachers. But Stella would yell at you. She
Yeah.
would just full on yell at you and just call you names. And because I was from the street, I was like, okay, all right, yes, okay, all right. So it didn't offend me, and it
Right.
didn't break me down, because I was used to people yelling at me. I was used to that. But I did see exactly what you're talking about. I did see other actors disappear. They disappeared in the class, and then they didn't show back up. It was, and whereas me, if you did something like that to me, I'd come back the next week, because I was going to prove to you that I was supposed to be in that class. Even though I left and cried in my car for like
Right.
2 hours, but I was like, I'm going back. And I literally had Roy London. He yelled at me in the class. He was like, I don't want you to come back. Don't come back to my class. And I left, and I didn't. He said, you're not giving me any emotion. You're like a rock. And I just looked at him, and I
Hmm.
left, got in my car, cried, came back the next week, and then he said, I told you not to come back. And I said, yeah. And then I did my scene, and I was able to do what he wanted. Um,
Right.
but not every actor has that street shield that can
Yeah.
say, you're not messing with me. And I applaud you for being sensitive to give that to the students, to recognize that is harmful in a lot of ways, because you also have a lot of teachers that did not have the career they wanted, and now they're abusing the other actors because they're hating on them. And I
That was my concern with a lot of that stuff. I was just like, how much of this is actually because it's going to be healthy for the student, and how much of it is you not realizing that you're taking it out on the student because you're maybe angry at something else. And one thing, not to cut you
no,
off,
no.
now to be fair, there are some students that will try to take the easy path, or not work, not show up. And it's not to say you let those students slide. You should always be clear and direct with them. And if they have not done the work, then you tell them you have not done the work, and we're going to move on, because now you're wasting everybody else's time. That's a different thing, right? Because you're
Right.
just calling it for what it is,
Right.
not that it's harmful. But sometimes you have to be honest with people. They don't like it, but it's not that you're abusing them. You're just saying, hey, this is what it is. If you're not showing up for yourself, you're wasting your time and your money. And when you're out there, whatever you're doing here, you're doing out there. You're doing the
Right.
same thing out there. So
Right. And it's important to call it out in the classroom, so they don't take it out into a professional setting and get blackballed, or
yeah,
or not be given a chance later on because of how they showed up to that audition. One of the things I think actors don't realize is, when they don't, going back to work ethic, when they don't have a work ethic and they don't bring everything to the table, it's a reflection on them, and a lot of times they won't get that next opportunity because they didn't show up the first time, or they go, well, it's only 2 lines, I want the leading part. And not understanding that it doesn't matter how many lines you have, it's how you show up. It is you are to be of service, connecting the love and the trust and the confidence. You also are coming on that set to be of service. Shonda Rhimes said something that's always stayed with me. When she was in the middle of Grey's Anatomy, she realized that she needed to vet everybody that worked on that show, from below the line to above the line. She needed to vet everybody, because she said the most important thing was to have people on the set you could get along with. irregardless of their talent, their craft. If you couldn't get along with them, they couldn't be on the set. And it has changed how I show up with people and how I watch people, to go, you know what, they're really talented, but they're going to be such a prima donna to work with. I think let's nix them. Let's move on. And it's that understanding that you have to be a team player, and being a team player with others means being a team player with yourself. It's very difficult to be a teacher, because you got to be good cop, bad cop, mother, father. You, you
It takes a lot out of you, and it's interesting because when I talk to my own spiritual teacher, I sometimes, I mean, I don't understand what she goes through because she has a whole different thing happening. But in terms of just the teacher aspect of dealing with different personalities and people and all walks of life, and some students come up to me and they'll say to me, I don't know how you could conduct the class the way you do when that person over there was doing some things that I just wanted to bop them over the head. And I said, I hear where you're coming from, but I have to sometimes handle things a certain way. Um, I can't always attack. I got to find out what's going on and then check in. And sometimes I check in with the students, not in front of the class, because I think some stuff might just be better in person, just one on one. And then, like you said earlier, some things, lessons for everybody
yes.
that they need to hear because it's just important.
Yes. And so when you're because you just said something which I think is amazing, is that even though you're teaching let's say a beginning class or even an advanced class, everybody in that class is still at a different level. So that, and it took me a long time to figure that out, that the teacher really has to work with that student. Not everybody's on this level, but it's like, I want to help you get to your level. So
Yeah.
to me, that it's very inspiring and very it it speaks a lot of your heart, that you're able to see the differences and not treat everybody like a cookie cutter actor.
Yeah.
That everybody's an individual, and how you nurture Tommy is going to be different from Carlos. Everybody
Yeah.
needs there are different plants in the nursery, and they all require something different. So
And the one thing I always tell people, I say, you're unique. There is nobody else like you. So even when you show up to the audition and you're in that hour of that particular type, right? Because during this hour to this hour, tall people, short people, this, whatever it is that they classify you in, you're not like anybody in that space. And when you can fully know that and accept that you have your own thing, go in that room and share that thing that is only yours, because that's how you leave an impression. Not an impression to book that job, but impression for the rest of your journey as an actor. Because think about it, how many things have you done with that same casting director? You still have that relationship with them, and they bring you back because they know what you can do.
right, and you're being authentic.
You're being authentic.
I think that is, or another word that is used, you're bringing your brand to the table, right?
Mm.
It's you're it's like everybody wanted Steve Buscemi because Steve Buscemi was authentic. He was
Mm-hmm.
just who he was. He wasn't trying to be Gandolfini. He was just being Steve Buscemi. And a lot of times, young actors are trying to be the other, somebody else, and instead of going, no, this is what I do.
Right.
Whatever that is, this is it. This is it, and that's how. That is how. The more I think, the more unique you are, the quicker you work.
Mm-hmm.
Because they want those special flavors in it. If everybody's the same, there's the picture's not that interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I always use this example, and you probably will know what I mean by this. When you think of like a cop show, right? Cop show, most people kind of do the same thing on cop shows. And then once in a while, you'll see somebody that stands out and you go, oh man, I look forward to seeing the show for that person because they do something with the character. Otherwise, everyone's just always kind of like talking like this, just in a way that like you can't even hear them. Like I've worked with actors where I can't even hear them and I'm only 2 feet away from them. It's so private and it's so to themselves, and it's this idea of what a cop or a detective should be. There's nothing special about it. What's your thing? And everybody has their own thing. It's just a matter of finding it, and it's there the whole time. So it's not that it's hard to find. It's
Right.
really just accepting self. Like, what do I do?
And
How
bringing
would I handle
courage.
that?
Yes, and bringing the courage
Bring those
to
nuances with confidence, right? Bring those choices with confidence.
yeah, the courage, because it takes courage to be different. It's easy to be like everybody else. So I'm just, and I'm sure you've seen this in the audition room, in the lobby of the audition room, where everybody is, they're basically giving the same reading, and most of them are reading. They're not really like at least filling it. It's just a reading. They're literally reading the paper, thinking that is it, and it's not.
Because there's that term, that phrase that people use about not doing anything. Don't do anything. You hear that a lot, right? In the business of acting or acting education. Don't do anything. When you go in that room, don't do anything. And so I think people take that and they actually just don't do anything. What they really want to say is, go in there and do the thing. Just don't hang on to it. Don't hang on to it. Just do what you have to do and keep it moving. Keep it moving. Make a choice, because the body is so smart. I tell this to people all the time. The body's so smart. When you make a decision, even when it comes to producing, right? You make a decision, your body just starts to do the thing it needs to do. If you decide, I'm going to make a cup of coffee, the body just starts doing what it needs to do. So you don't have to overthink the choice. You don't have to go, all right, I'm going to make a cup of coffee. Well, how am I going to make it? So I'm going to put the hand like this. If I hold the cup like this and put my elbow, yeah, that's good. Put the elbow like this is good. Oh, that's really drinking. No. How do you drink coffee? All right, well, then do it. Just go for it and trust. And that trusting you're talking about earlier, and which is a thing I teach a lot of, is trust yourself. Trust that you're smart, that you know things, that you have stories. Now, mind you, you've been rehearsing this moment for a long time because you've been making coffee for a while, so you kind of know it. Well, that happens in rehearsal. We decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, but make a decision and then trust your choices. The biggest mistake that any actor can make, because I've made it, which is I will make all my choices. I'll know exactly what I want to do with the piece. I walk into the room and then I look at the casting directors and then I see the camera. I look at the room and suddenly I say, you know what? I don't think the choices I was going to do are going to be good for this room. Based on that woman's face or that man's look, I'm going to change my choices. I'm going to do it this way instead. I'm going to do it the way I think they want me to do it. They haven't said anything, but I'm going to do it this way. And then suddenly, every single choice you're doing is not your own. It is produced from fear. That's why I used to leave the auditions and I would kick my ass for a week or a month, depending how bad I wanted that role. And I realized later, yeah, I was not in control.
You abandoned yourself.
I abandoned myself
Mm-hmm.
out of fear
Mm-hmm.
that what I had to offer was not good enough. I didn't trust my choices, and that was my biggest mistake. And so once I realized that at some point, then I started going in there and just go for it. And you start to understand later, and this was some lessons that my teacher taught me too, is it's okay. Be okay with limitations. You can't play every role. You're not right for every role. There's certain things you can and cannot do, and just be okay with that. But the things you can do, make them better. Let them blossom, fly. So,
I had a casting. I learned a lot from a casting director that I was privileged to work with. I knew her for a long time, and I was always afraid of her. Like so there's some casting directors when you go and you go, oh Lord, It's like they can see right through you. It's like, oh, Jesus, help me, help me.
Temperature change.
But I learned one of the best things I learned about her, working with her in a couple of casting sessions, well, more than a couple, but was to go in there as as an actor, to go into the audition, first of all, with the understanding you already got the job because you're there. That is the job. The audition
Right.
is the job. There, that's it. So go in there and just be of service. Be of service with the material. Be of service to the person you're reading with. Be of service to the casting director or whoever the group of people are that are in the room. But and that it takes all the weight off of you as an actor because you're not self-involved. You're not like, did I do this right? Did I yell too much? Did I not yell enough? What, you know? And it's like if you they then become your acting partner
Mm.
because they are you're getting from them, even if they're not giving you anything, you're making them, you know. It's like, so Victor, tell me what's going on. Okay,
Mm.
you're not talking to me. Okay, you know, it changes. It's organic, it's real, because you're not all about how you are bringing the character in the room. You're being part of the group. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, how are they dealing? Okay, well then they're not talking to me, so all right, well then I'll wait. You know, and those moments change things in the room. I you know, at least that's been my understanding, but she really gave me a whole different outlook on, oh, that's what you do. You don't come in there needy. I call it leaking. You know, like like when you're not in your center, you're leaking. You know, cuz and the sharks smell it and then they start chomping at you. You know, it's like
Right.
doing stand up when you get on stage in a comedy club and you want the audience to like you. Well, you're leaking and they start booing you and, you know, get off the stage because you came in there so needy and so broken that it stunk up the room. Instead of coming in there with your confidence and going, you know what, I don't really care if you like me or not. I love me. And it is that we have to bring in, I think, to the space. But if you're damaged and you haven't done that internal work that you are talking about, that's so vital, to really go, what is it that stops me? Am I a laugh whore? You know, I used to in comedy. You know, I had a wonderful comic. His name is Jackson Purdue, and he really taught me a lot because he was a road warrior. You know, he was out there all the time, and I remember him saying, "Turn down your laugh meter. Go up there and just be of service. It's not about you." And it changed my entire life on a comedy stage forever, because it was like, oh, okay, you mean I don't have to go, do you like me, do you like me, do you, you know. It was like, but that's what we do as actors. Sometimes we go into the audition, I gotta pay the light bill, do you like me, did I get the job,
You
the,
like me 'cause I gotta pay this bill.
exactly. And it's that going in there, being of service, but having income coming in from something else,
Yeah.
so that you're not leaking, you're not needy, you know. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off, but it is
No, honestly, I love that you said that because it made me think about this thing that I wanted to share about Tita, which I think is so important, that, because that thing you said about leaking, which I think is such a cool thing. I think I'm gonna run with that leaking thing. I like that. You know, when I was doing stand up in the beginning, again, as I was mentioning earlier, I was hoping that people liked me, that you would laugh at the jokes, and the more you laugh, the cooler I am. Comedy has a very like high school energy, where it's like the coolest kid in town kind of thing, or in the crowd, and so in the beginning, I wanted people to laugh, and if you liked me, you laughed. Then I was of value. And, it wasn't until later that I was just like, no, I can't do that. That's not what this job is. This job is to see the world from your perspective and then hit the audience with that, and keep it honest and keep it real. Enjoy that process. Don't come in there with fear. Like you said, they'll smell it. They'll smell it and they come after you. Audiences know. And then it's contagious. The whole audience will turn on you immediately. Um, as you know, right? But the one thing that is so special about Tita for me is that I'm in a place with Tita that everything that I create is what I absolutely love and enjoy first, that I'm laughing at it first. And what I'm doing now is I'm sharing it with the people. Another thing that is super important to me is that for the first time, I'm not trying to cater to everyone. Before, I was trying to figure out, well, how do I expand beyond my community? How is it not just become a regional thing, where it works here, but it doesn't work here? And you're fighting to figure out how you can cover every single thing. And finally, I was okay with knowing that with this particular cartoon, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be like that, but with Tita, she has a community of people that support her that is in the thousands. It's in the thousands. I probably have performed more for people as Tita than I performed as a stand-up comic, trying to fit every club. So now that's not important. And I'm okay with not feeling like I have to accommodate everybody. And it feels good. And I keep it authentic because of it. There are episodes where characters speak Spanish. I don't have any subtitles. I just say, well, figure it out. And I don't mean that to be mean.
Right,
It's
but
just like, no, it's cool. Because if I translate into, if I put English
it's not
subtitles,
going to
then
work. It's
I
not
have to
going to.
put Spanish subtitles for the English part.
Right, right. That's funny.
It's not fair to my people. But I just think that's important when you reach a point where it's just like, you feel like you can just create from a place of that. Because there's a lot of sometimes, networks or companies trying to fill this like diversity thing that I feel sometimes is unrealistic for some worlds and neighborhoods. I think you just have to honor what that story is and let it be that.
And then
And
they
it's
come to you. And
yeah,
then they come to you. You're not going to them. They're coming to you because of your authenticity and what you bring. I wanted to ask, as an actor who teaches acting,
yeah.
what have you learned in the acting class that you then take out and use for yourself?
That's a good
You know what I mean?
question.
Because I think it makes you, iron sharpens iron. So you're sharpening somebody else, and it's like it's reflecting back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my constant talk about, preparation, work ethic, which you mentioned earlier, giving myself the time to do the proper investigation, ask the right questions, really just prepare. I say to myself, well, everything I tell my students, I have to demand this of me too. I can't tell them this is what you should do and then don't practice it at all. That doesn't make any sense, for me to teach that. So for me, and then also I see myself in them when they're up there. So sometimes I see the things that I still have issues with because nothing is perfect. You're always learning and building. And then I see the person that I used to be and how I've graduated from that. So, it's an exchange. It's a reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. And then you get surprised by things that people do. You go, man, that's great. Like sometimes people are just starting out, but their raw approach to things, very inspiring. And it reminds you to let go of this idea that it has to be this way. They have no idea. They just create it from their heart. So it brings you back.
What is your superpower as an actor, you think?
My sense of humor and I think my love, but I would say sense of humor is The main one. As a stand-up comic, my superpower is improvisation, seeing things in the moment and expanding upon it, creating characters from things I see right in front of me in that moment. That is truly my superpower. Sometimes I don't practice it. Sometimes I try to go back to the written material and the autopilot thing. That doesn't work. It's got to be that first thing.
As a teacher, what do you consider your superpower?
My compassion, empathy, and love.
A triple. I love that.
Triple.
That's a great superpower to have. As a content creator, what is your superpower?
Superpower is getting it done no matter what, figuring it out, not being deterred by anything, not being afraid to take a risk.
What's your superpower as a husband?
Superpower as a husband is to stay quiet and listen to my wife, just in case she's watching this interview.
That's the best superpower of all. And what do you think your superpower is as a father?
Uh, uh, there's so many, but playing with my kids, loving them, just being the best dad I can be is my superpower. And when I become a monster and I chase them around the house, that's when that's what the characters.
Oh, as a stand-up actor, what do you see differently about the two, and what do you see as the same?
I think they're both rooted. They're all connected to the same source. You know, there's something that has to be done. As a stand-up comic, when you do act outs and you play characters on stage, depending on your commitment to those characters and the details and the nuances, is very close to what we do as actors. We exist in that place. Sometimes in stand-up, sometimes characters are a little larger than you would probably choose to do them on film or on stage, and then maybe not. You know, so I feel like they are connected to the same source. The difference is that when it's funny because I was heavily in the comedy world, so when I started working as an actor, sometimes I was waiting for the response. We do the scene, and then I'd look around and everybody's off to the next scene. Production, everybody's moving off. There was no laughter. There was no bowling ball making that strike sound that would then confirm that it worked. So as a stand-up, the laughter tells you that the joke is working. In acting, you have to know, you have to just say, yes, this is working. This is good. So,
Knowing when you're on and when you're off.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was taught that by Roy London, which was one of the best gifts I ever got as an actor, which is when you work, you have to know when you're on, when you hit those choices, when you've done what you're supposed to do and you feel satisfied, you know.
Right.
So you go, oh, I did it. And if they say do it again, then you can have a whole different choice. But you know you executed what you wanted to, and you feel like, you know, I won the scene. I won in the scene. And then knowing when you're not on and going, what was off about it? So if you're being asked to do it again, you can make that quick adjustment to go, okay, that wasn't a hot enough choice. You know, so I really have to find something real quick that's going to take me to a life and death situation in order to crank it up, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I truly believe that. I truly believe that you have to, as an actor, have to know when you're on and when you're not, because the truth is, for a lot of Latino actors, a lot of actors of color, we don't get the opportunity to do a third or fourth take. You know, they it's, give that line, okay, that's good. They don't care. You're not, you are insignificant, especially if you only have a day player position. You know, if you're on a week, maybe they'll care a little bit more, but they're looking out for their leads. They could care less about you. So you gotta bring those goods. You have to be, your work ethic has to be spectacular.
Yeah.
In those one or two lines, that
Yeah.
you have to bring it. You can't be playing with anybody. You can't be on your phone. You got to come in there and deliver the goods to the point where everybody stops and takes notice. Like, damn, this actor killed it.
Yep.
That's how you have to. At least that's how I was taught. That you nail it in the first take. So anything after the first take is on them, because you did what you needed to do.
That's right. Just assume there's only that take.
That's right. You can't, you know, and I think, just to veer off for 1 second about headshots, as an actor, you know, a lot of times actors are not comfortable in front of a still camera. So it takes a lot of shots before they nail that shot. Instead of coming prepared like they are coming prepared for an audition and going, oh no, I'm nailing this in the first shot. We could do 100 shots, but you're gonna get my good stuff right in the beginning.
Yeah, and that happens because the actor, most actors who are not comfortable with those pictures, they dismiss themselves from the process almost to say, well, the photographer will figure it out. And then the photographer has to find you. They have to find you. If you show up, then the photographer can start capturing you from the beginning.
But a lot of times they can't, because they don't know you. They're just clicking away. A lot of times they don't know who you are, what you sell, what your special power is, what, you know, they're just like, okay, another actor, click, 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 click. And it is your job. And again, this was something I learned years ago. There was a photographer who had a makeup studio, and so she needed models to come for her makeup artist. So you got, as a model, you got 2 pictures for every look they did to you, only 2. And the first time I did it, I was not prepared, because I'm thinking I'm going to get a couple. She went click, like, okay, that's it, thanks so much for coming. I was like, I've been here for 2 hours, this was it. So I went back home. I was so, you talk about kicking yourself. I was like, oh, this will never happen. I went there the next time, and I probably did it, I don't know, maybe like 5-6 months. Like, I would sign up to do it again, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to master these 2 shots, because I know that she doesn't even like let you get in position. She takes her camera, click, like, I don't have time for this. So as soon as I got in front of that camera, I was like, yeah, that's right. And I knew, okay, what kind of shot do I need now? And I think that is a wonderful, wonderful exercise for actors to do, so that when they get in front of the camera, they nail it right away. They're not thinking in their heads, oh God, I don't know, do I look good? I don't know. It's like, no, you gotta nail it.
Yeah, I think that goes back to you got to make a decision. You got to walk in there. And actually, that's a great point about headshots. Like, when you walk into the headshot, it's like, don't leave it up to the photographer. You got to take control of what you want. Do your research, look at the photographers, look at their style, and say, oh man, I want to live within that style. That's the person I call. And then I show up with my options. Don't let them try to figure out what you should be. Because I know in the beginning, I had no idea. I was waiting for the photographer to tell me what I should be or what I should be doing. You know, that's why a lot of those pictures are like weird. Like, you get your hand on a brick wall or something, and it's not you.
Right.
Know, so.
And you have to know what you sell before you go in front of the camera, so that whatever shot they take of you, it's what you sell. You know, because a lot of times you have photographers that are trying to twist you into, you know, well, Victor, could you just move your head to the side and then bring your arm up? and you're like a puppet. You're not really. Wait a minute, this isn't organic. You're,
Yeah.
you catch me as I move. I'm not posing for you. You got to be quick because I'm giving you the best of me. So you bring it. I think that is anyway. I veered off here. So
No, I like it. It's good.
um, how has being a husband affected your art?
Hmm. Well, the truth is, if you think of it as a hindrance of the art, right? If you were to think of my wife or even my kids are getting in the way of the art, then for me, because of who I am today and my spiritual beliefs and believing in myself, for me, my wife adds so much to me. And, she is a huge support system to what I do. And I couldn't do this journey without her because of all the things. We've known each other for a long time, and we've been married for going on 11 years, but we've been together for 21 years, and basically kind of grew up together. And before that, I knew her from school. We were just
Wow.
students in school. But we were friends in high school too. I had no idea that I would marry this girl that sat two chairs from me in musical theater class. But so my point is that she definitely, absolutely makes me a way better person than I was before. From just simple as silly as it might sound, from just washing my clothes and how to wash my clothes and how to cook and making sure that things in the house are clean. For instance, the bathroom must be clean and the kitchen must be clean. You meet these bachelor guys that they might have a nice apartment, but then you go into the bathroom and the toilet is disgusting and the bathtub is disgusting. So she taught me that when you have people coming over to your house, and that a woman knows what kind of man she's getting when she sees his bathroom.
That's true. That is true.
So, just basic things in life. She's taught me so much. And, she is really, people say this, but she is really my best friend. Like, I turn to her for everything from, decisions to even when I'm working on Tita, I look to her to see if she's laughing at the jokes. Because I say that she's the best audience. She won't laugh if it's not funny. She doesn't just laugh. She's tough audience. So if she laughs, I secretly know that it's really funny. And then I'll keep it. When she doesn't laugh, I go, let me look at that chunk. Maybe I need to remove these 2 minutes. They don't work. And usually that's the correct answer.
That's awesome. How has being a father affected you on Father's Day?
Um, I think being a dad, every day is Father's Day, at least when the kids are little, because they treat me like every day is Father's Day. So I probably will cry about Father's Day once they become teenagers and they don't think that dad is as cool anymore. Unless they just think dad is cool all the time, then I'll take it. Um, but it's funny. Father's Day has a different significance to me, just because I feel like every day is Father's Day. So when it does come, it's great, and they celebrate me. But yeah, they're great. They keep me busy. I love those crazy kids.
What does Hispanic Heritage Month mean to you?
Hispanic Heritage Month to me is a time to to celebrate our culture, to celebrate other Latino groups. I never understood why it started halfway in the month. I don't know the answer to that. I'm hoping somebody can tell me. It's like, oh, Hispanic Heritage Month. Quick, the 15th. Let's just do it now, And Latinos are like, all right, well, okay, I'll take it. Fine. The 15th or the middle of the month. Um, well, for me, I guess, I celebrate us, all year round. I think it's cool we have a month to do it, but I think it's great to celebrate it all the time. And I'm happy that we have a month to do that, you know, and to be open to other cultures, because we're not just one big chunk, you know. When they invented when the word Latino started to come into play, I know a lot of different groups are like, well, no, I'm Puerto Rican. No, I'm Mexican. I'm Dominican. I don't know what this Latino thing is. And then eventually you start hearing the word Hispanic and then Latinx. Um, but anyways, on a lighter note, I think it's great. I think it's great that we have the month to celebrate each other. And yeah, I think it's cool. I think we should have Hispanic Heritage Year. How about that? We'll start a campaign all
What
year round.
what do you think is needed to prop up more Latinos in the industry?
We need more, we obviously, it's always the ongoing thing. We need more stories. We need more of our stories, more programming. We need for, we definitely need to equip ourselves, get the tools we need to just start doing it. A lot of us have stories. A lot of us procrastinate and we don't create things, and we waste our talents waiting. I don't think we have time to wait, because I don't think tomorrow is guaranteed in this journey. So you got to do what you can do in this time, and put yourself out there. You don't have to try to swing the home run at the top. You can create your own content. Start it as a web series, create a one-man, one-woman show, make a feature film within your means, build your audience. Your audience is there. A lot of times, my biggest problem was that I was seeking for an audience outside, sometimes of my own community, to be accepted, to then come back as a success to my community. And when you do that, you waste a lot of time, because those doors don't open. But you have doors that belong to you, that you can build yourself. So I think people just need to start creating. And there are a lot of people that are creating. So I don't want to take away the credit, because there are a lot of content creators out there who things don't happen on what the world considers to be a success. But I think you need to know that what you're doing is a success, and it is an inspiration to others. And sometimes you don't know who you inspire. Here's my other part of it to wrap up this answer is, I think that networks and companies and corporations need to realize that just because you have the one program, the one movie, you did not cover your Latino quota for this time frame. There are different stories, they're different groups, just like I was mentioning about Hispanic Heritage Month. You've got Mexican, you've got Puerto Rican, you've got Dominicans, you got Colombians, Peruvians, you got people from all over Latin America. There's so many stories, and people that live in the United States. There's so many different types of stories to tell. So be open and just keep them authentic. Don't try to do this diverse thing that's unrealistic. If the story is Mexican, the story is Mexican. If the story is Puerto Rican, it's Puerto Rican, and so on and so on. Keep it real. Tell the people that you've got it, and people will come. Just as much as they shove these programs down our throat, watch this. There's a song that plays on the radio. You don't care about it the first time. You don't even like the song. But then they play it a million times, and suddenly you're like, that's my jam. The same way you shove that down our throat, shove down some home cooking. And you don't have to shove it. Just offer some home cooking versus fast food. Give yourself a chance. Be open to change. It's okay. I don't. So that's my thing on it.
You are a content creator, but you're also an entrepreneur, because not only are you creating content, but you are creating merchandise. So starting way back when you did your comedy show, and you were selling your CD, DVDs, and then Stockroom, and now Tita. You are selling merchandise based on your web series Tita. So tell us what you got. What kind of merchandise you got?
Yeah, so we got some cool stuff, man. We've got coffee mugs that say different things with different Tita expressions, like some that say, fíjate, presenta, embuste, come on. Of course, the way she says it, embuste, presentar, right? And we've got all sorts of T-shirts and fanny packs and sweaters.
And where
We
can
even
we
have a.
get this wonderful merchandise from?
You can log on to titasworld.com.
So you also do self tapes for actors, helping actors to get their tapes together for auditions if they're not technically inclined.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of actors, know how to do it themselves, and they have setups at home. But the one thing that they don't have in that process is sometimes a reader that's an actor, or or a good coach while the taping is happening. So they'll come to me for those additional services, right? That's all included, which is that I'm going to be pushing to get the very best out of them. And of course, the quality of the tapes are really, really good. So, the sound is right, the look is right, it looks cinematic. I mean, the way that I shoot the self tapes is almost the way that, you're like tests, screen tests for a movie. I treat it sort of the same way.
That's awesome. I have to tell you that this has been one of the most enjoyable interviews for me. You you have so much to offer, and I just love your mind, how you think, the fact that you are really a well-rounded artist. You're not, you know, you're not just an actor or a comic, but you are a self-realized artist. You get to do everything that is part of who you are, from acting to directing to producing to writing to coaching. I mean, that is just it is. We don't have enough of people like you doing that. So I just want to celebrate you right now and just thank you so much for what you do for the community, how you show up in life, how you inspire people. Because believe me, there are going to be people watching this that are going to be so inspired to go, I'm going to go do a short, I'm going to go do a cartoon, I'm going to go do a comedy CD, DVD. Not only are you a realized artist that taps into every part of you, but you are also an entrepreneur. You are also a visionary, because you were, as you were talking about stuff, I was like, oh man, he was so ahead of the curve as an artist, just trying to find your niche, to plant your stake in the ground. So I just want to say thank you, Victor. You are amazing, 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 amazing. So thank you so much for joining us, and tell us where we can find you, because we didn't get to cover this, but I know you have two podcasts. One that's all acting, and the other one that you do with your daughter.
So yeah, I have two podcasts. One for the acting studio. If you go to YouTube, you can type in Victor Cruz Acting Studio. And then I also have a podcast that I do with my daughter called the Leslie and Daddy Podcast, where her and I get together, hang out, we talk about different things related to her first day of school, losing her first tooth, science and math. And that you can just type in Leslie and Daddy Podcast, and you can find the channel for that on YouTube. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Victor Cruz Films. And I'm also at Victor Cruz Films on Twitter, but mainly I hang out on Instagram. So just find me there. Check out, all the stuff is up there, and you can reach out to me there if you have any questions.
One last thing.
Yeah.
What would you like to be doing in 5 years?
What I would like to be doing in 5 years. Continuing to produce. Just continuing to produce, and on a more developed level. Doesn't have to be entirely about financial, but I just look forward to being more free, more enlightened, more confident within myself, and just continuous to produce in a fearless way, a place that makes me happy and that keeps an environment in my home that is peaceful, harmonious, and just filled with love, and that I'm not pulling time from my kids because of my journey that I'm finding time to do that as well.
What do you want your legacy to be in show business?
It's a good question. No one's ever asked me that. What do I want to be known for in the business? That I wasn't afraid to give it a shot. That I did it. I did a lot of really cool things. That you can do your thing. That I was kind. That I was compassionate. And, when the doors were locked, I just, either kicked them open, snuck in, or made my own door, my way.